You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 224. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Let me ask you a few questions. How do you feel when you hear the words time management? When you think about calendaring and scheduling, do you feel a sense of freedom or a sense of constriction? If I were to ask you, for example, to plan out your week, would you consider this something that feels fun, that feels liberating, that feels exciting, productive, or do you dread that? Do you think, well, there's no point in making a plan. I never make a plan because things just happen anyways. This week's episode is going to be a fun one. I've titled it Confessions of an Efficiency Enthusiast because I wanted to dive in on a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, one that really lights me up. And I'm hoping that by sharing some of the things that I love about being an efficiency enthusiast, and I'll tell you in a minute what I mean by that, you will either see yourself in what I'm describing and it will resonate with you and you'll feel somewhat validated in being an enthusiast. You might also not relate on any level, but you might peer into that window and have a sense of, okay, now I get it, why the people in my life who are like that are the way that they are. And what I'm hoping that you get from today's episode is that you situate yourself on the spectrum of enthusiasm when it comes to planning and efficiency, time management, that maybe you walk away with a sense of validation, that you walk away with some practical tips, and hopefully that you have fun along the way. It is the last week right now before school goes back in session for my children. It is a Wednesday morning. I'm recording this podcast episode with my son downstairs. He's watching, I don't know what on YouTube. My husband and daughter have stepped out to grab a coffee. And later today, we're going on a mini road trip. We're going to an overnight trip to Chilliwack. We are staying the night at a hotel that has a pool with a water slide. Tomorrow, we'll be going to an adventure park that is just near Chilliwack. So it's kind of like our last little hurrah before the back to school. Great chance for our family to be together. We're going to do the things that my family likes to do, like go to Walmart. It seems to be a real attraction to my children. And so it's just time together and I'm looking forward to it. And, as I think about next week and getting back into routines and how the summer's been a break for me, I've definitely had a reduced work schedule. I've booked a lot more time off than I have in recent summers. And it means I've been scheduling less. I've been planning less. I've been doing less work. And now that September is rolling around, all the routines and systems are going to come back into play. So my work will ramp up. The kids are going to be back in school. So I'm getting ready myself for that transition into a more structured lifestyle relative to what it's been like this summer. So for you, if you're listening at the same time that I'm recording or when it comes out, which will be the first week back at school, if you're where I am, which is in Vancouver, Canada, and your kids go to the same school, I know there's different start times depending on your district and where you live, etc. But this season really is a transition for so many families where you've got your kids going back to school, your work is probably ramping up if it has slowed down over the summer. So you might relate to what I'm talking about here today. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to share with you what I mean by being an efficiency enthusiast. Then I'm going to talk about some of the pros, which you may resonate with or not. I'm going to talk about some of the cons. I will offer a few confessions because I did promise some confessions. And then finally, some takeaways from today's episode. So buckle up, buckle up and hang on for today's ride. I'm hoping that it will be as fun for you to listen to as it is for me to record. And a big thank you for joining me here this week. I really, really love connecting with you. I really love hearing from you. I sometimes receive feedback from you, from listeners, people who tell me they've been listening to the podcast. I recently reached out to a lawyer to do some speaking on a project, and she said, I've been listening to your podcast. I've been listening to it, or I listened to it while I was moving from one part of Canada to another. You were in my ear as I drove from, from one coast to the other. And that means so much to me, right? I had some of you reach out and wish me a good trip in Paris. And again, that really means a lot to me. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for joining me, whether it's every week, whether it's once in a blue moon. I appreciate you. So thank you for joining me. And I hope you enjoy this episode. So with that, what exactly do I mean by efficiency enthusiast? Why am I talking about it? Why do we want to record an episode about that today? Well, the reason that it's on my mind is that I was completing a questionnaire the other day where it was wonderful. I'm being spotlighted for some work that I've done, which is an honor. And one of the questions was, what do you love most about your work? And there are a couple of things that I highlighted. Number one is just helping people solve their problems and reach their goals. That is one of the things that I love doing. So if you're working with me and we make a plan and you follow that plan and you're doing well and you make partner or you get promoted, you may decide that it's time to leave a job that you're really unhappy with and you've been struggling with that decision, and we take you through a process, right? You work through some of the questions, the reservations that you have. You see if you can make things better where you are. Maybe you decide it's just not going to happen. And so then you prepare yourself to move, and then you actually move, right? There's that relief that comes with that. There's that transition into something that's better for you, that's more aligned with your current goals versus maybe what your goals were when you first started the job that you were in. That can be really gratifying. When I have a conversation with a lawyer and they sit down and tell me they have no idea what they want, and then 5 minutes later, they've basically just spelled out exactly what they want. They just needed to express it in words. I mean, these are moments that are so, so satisfying. Sometimes it's just that sense of confidence that you become more intentional about your everyday and you feel more confident as a result, right? It might be that you're delegating more, that you're letting go of old identities. It can be that you're incorporating more rest. This is something that happens a lot where you're so busy that you're not taking time for yourself and you need almost like permission and structure around your downtime until that becomes something that is normal for you. So there's all these ways that I feel really like satisfied, fulfilled, I love about my work. And the other thing that I wrote on this questionnaire was that I get kind of giddy when it comes to time management. It's super weird or not, I don't know, but I get really like viscerally excited. If somebody tells me they want to work on time management, I kind of have to like curb my enthusiasm because I start seeing all these possibilities, I start getting all these ideas. And so I was thinking about why that is. And I think it's because some of the bigger questions, the career questions, the transition questions, the partnership questions, some of them take a little bit more time, I think, to actually implement. Usually, if you're stuck on something like a job, there's a lot to work through in order to get to a decision. Not always, but there can be. So the process isn't always as easy. And I shouldn't say that time management is easy, but to me, it feels easy. So to me, it's like there's a process that sometimes takes more time. It takes more like deep thinking, and it takes more risk, right? It means sometimes giving something up that you valued in order to pursue the thing that you really know is calling to you. That's a tougher thing to kind of work your way through. Whereas for me, when I think about time management, I see it almost like it's how my brain is structured. I see the structures and organizations and systems and problems and solutions, and there's an immediate effect. If you start calendaring today, you will feel immediately the impact on your practice. And so to me, these are those wins that you can have. And now that's not to say it doesn't take time to create systems and develop habits and practices. It does take time to really fully develop something that works for you. But the immediate impact can be significant. And so I love that process. I also love that lawyers who come to me who are struggling in that domain often are really high performers, right? They have reached really high levels of success. And this thing, the actual mechanical execution of their work is holding them back. So if we can take their great intellect, their capacity, their hard work, and apply that to learn tools, techniques, and strategies to be more efficient, to plan better, to feel more in control of their practice, it can have a significant impact on how they feel in the execution of their work and also in the execution itself. So the reason why I'm thinking about this topic today, the reason I wanted to record it, is that I was a little bit surprised, in a sense, when I was completing this questionnaire about how strongly I feel about this topic. And then I started thinking about how I connect with the idea of efficiency. So I think I used the word efficiency enthusiast in the questionnaire, and I came to that term. I guess I coined it. I don't know, maybe other people have used it before, because normally I would call myself like a time management geek or something like that, a time management nerd. And I thought, well, I don't really need to be self-deprecating about that. It's not a bad thing. It's not something that I'm embarrassed about. I don't want to throw shade on it or anything like that. Sorry, can I say throw shade? Does that even make sense? I don't know. I think my kids have used that expression, so now I'm trying to adopt it without actually knowing what it means. So anyways, I don't want to disparage against time management or my enthusiasm for it. So I thought efficiency enthusiast has a nice ring to it. And I think it's important to talk about because I know that some of you out there are the same, that you are also very enthusiastic about time management, that efficiency is something that you value. And so you might find that you connect with what I'm saying here today. You might feel that sense of validation. And also for some of you who may be struggling with time management, you may not have the same love of planning, of structure, of organization. It might not come naturally to you. It might be something you're not interested in. You might be a lot more interested in going with the flow. And so this might be an opportunity to think about what else is possible for you, right? How you might integrate a bit more structure in a way that actually feels good and not overly constricting for you in your practice. So with that, I'd like to offer a bit of a definition. This is not a textbook definition. This is my definition, what I mean by an efficiency enthusiast. And really it boils down to resources and using them most effectively. So you can think about your resources, right? What do you have available to you that you will be wanting to maximize? And there are some that are intangible. Time is one of those, probably the first thing that comes to mind, at least for me and for a lot of lawyers, right? If you're billing in 6-minute increments, then chances are you're highly sensitized to your time, the value of your time, not wasting time, using your time effectively, billing for your time. Time is money, etc. So time is one of those resources. It's intangible. And I'm pretty focused and I'll even go as far as to say maybe even obsessed with optimizing my time. I like to make sure I am taking my days and making the most of each and every one of them. So time is an intangible resource that you may be wanting to be efficient with. Your energy. So you have so much energy in a day. Where are you spending your energy? Is that energy being devoted to productive things that make you feel good? Or are you spending your energy complaining or, second guessing or doubting? And so being mindful of where you're focusing your energy and your attention to, those are resources. How are you spending them? You also can think about tangible resources. So money is a good example. You have money in the bank, there's a dollar figure attached to them. So I love to be efficient with my money. I like to spend it in a way that maximizes joy. So I've kind of always been like that. Growing up, my family was fine. We were not starving, but I didn't have an unlimited budget to go and do whatever I wanted with it. I had to have a budget. I made my own money. At one point, I took over grocery shopping for our family because I really liked it. I think it was around the time I started to drive. So it's probably around 16. And I loved going to the grocery stores. And I'd look at the flyers every week and be like, ooh, like that thing I like is on sale. And I still kind of shop like that. I see what's on sale. I don't love going out to Costco because it's far from where I live, but I will buy in bulk if I see that our laundry detergent at our grocery store is on sale. I'll be like, great, buy extra few bottles. So money to me is something that I like to spend consciously. That might be a resource where you're thinking about being efficient with your money, right? How do you want to spend it in a way that yields the maximum value to you? Space, if you've got a limit on your space, or even if you have unlimited space, again, you might be thinking about how do you want to spend that space, or how do you want to use that space strategically? So if you think about your office space, where you place things, what you choose to have on display, what you file away behind closed doors. So how you're using your space, that's a finite resource. And then water, food, those tangible things that get consumed. When you're thinking about being efficient, you're thinking about your resources. So those intangible resources like time, energy, focus, attention, and also your more tangible resources like money, space, food, etc. What I also associate with being an efficiency enthusiast is that I really dislike waste. And I know I'm not alone in this, but the idea of wasting time, the idea of wasting my energy, the idea of wasting water, wasting food, wasting space, all of that, it kind of grates on me. So we are looking slowly for a new space to live in, and I will go to open houses, and it always baffles me because you'll see that the square footage on a listing doesn't necessarily correspond to the livability of a particular house. Because if you go into a house and there's a lot of space, but it's not set up in a way that you can use it, it's kind of a waste of space. So that kind of thing irks me versus space that's efficient and easy to use. And that really makes me feel happy. So if you can relate to this, then maybe you've got that inner efficiency enthusiast and you're like, yes, Paula, I totally get you. Like, you are speaking my language. You might be listening and thinking, wow, you're nuts. Like, you really have taken this way too far and you need to take a chill pill and relax. So I get it. Everyone's got a different perspective. And so thanks for joining me. And hopefully this turns out to be a fruitful conversation for you. Now, I mentioned that I was going to go through some of the pros. So if you are an enthusiast and you are thinking, like, what are the benefits of being this way? I've got a handful of pros that I think arise from being this way. So number one is that I'm really good at planning. Things that are making a plan, organizing, it's thinking about the logical flow of things and having things in a good sequence. So for example, I love planning my calendar. I love planning trips. I love helping other people plan their calendars, plan their trips. If there's a big project, it's breaking it down into steps and figuring out how those steps are going to go. I love to be organized. Now, I am not as organized in my real life as I would like to be. I live in a household with 3 other people, and collectively, I would not say we're hyper organized. The things that are essential, I have organized, and the rest I just have to let go. If you've got young children, teenagers in your house, then maybe you've adopted the same philosophy. Again, kind of goes back to efficiency. I only have so much time. I only have so much energy, and I don't want to spend it picking up other people's stuff. So I've kind of carved out my little islands within my home where there's order, at least my sense of order, and the rest of it, I just kind of had to put my blinders on at this stage of my life. But I love the feeling of being organized. If you put me in a space that is organized, I feel that. It's like there's an alignment between what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking and the world outside of me. So you might be the same way. It means organizing things into topics, into categories. This is really useful in law. You might find that that sense of organization, the way the law is organized, the way there's tests for things, the way that topics are organized, that can really resonate. So that can feel really good when you're in an organized space. Conversely, it can also kind of rub you the wrong way if you feel like you're in a place of chaos. But organization is something that I would consider a strength and something that I really love doing. I naturally will want to organize things. Logical flow. So my favorite example of this is cooking. I love to make meals where everything is done at the same time, which means planning backwards, right? If there's a 2-hour roast that goes in first, the salad that takes 5 minutes goes at the very end, right? The potatoes, maybe it's 1 hour, so they go in halfway through the roasting time, etc. So you're planning backwards. And this, of course, comes in handy when you're working. You've got an application coming up or a court date coming up. You want to be thinking about the steps that you're taking in advance so that you're doing them in a logical sequence so that everything is ready for you when you finally get to the moment of execution. And then finally, is there anything else in that category? I think that's about it, right? And so you can see how having attunement to these different components, right? Planning, organization, a logical flow, sequencing of events, all that lends itself to order. So your days can be more predictable. You get things done efficiently. You're not wasting time in transitions, etc. And I apply this to the way that I calendar my time, the way that I plan projects. I apply it to meal planning. So again, this is a family of 4. So I'm very methodical about how I prepare meals. You can be pretty much guaranteed to have a roasted meal on any given Tuesday. I love the oven because you pop the food in and then you can leave it. It's done whenever it's done. You don't have to stand there and stir anything. Maybe, check on it a couple of times. But Tuesdays, you can be guaranteed to get probably roasted chicken or roasted pork. Clothing. So I will buy things on repeat because I know I like them. They fit, they're easy, they go with everything. And so you might find that there are components of your life where you are very strategic and you are planning things very methodically. So that I would consider a pro. It creates predictability, planning. I know it's coming. Another pro is that I've got a lot of ideas. Because I'm so enthusiastic about efficiency, I've done a lot of research. I've tried a lot of things. I've worked with a lot of clients. I've helped a lot of clients solve their problems. Early in my coaching practice, I realized that a lot of my clients struggled with ADHD. So I've done additional research into executive functioning and the different skills that we have, the different functions of the brain. Planning, organization, time management, task initiation, staying on task, focus. All of these are executive functions of your brain. And I've done a whole series of podcast episodes about executive functioning skills and time management. And so not only do you get to learn the outside structures, right? How to plan and structure and all that in a way that's efficient and logical, but understanding how your brain works and how you can match those things up. So that if you know that maybe your working memory, which is an executive functioning skill, if your working memory isn't very strong, then you can support yourself by creating external sources, right? Writing lists and creating documents or systems that externalize information so that you're not relying on your working memory in order to hold on to all the dates and things that you need to do, etc. So that's the second benefit, is that I've done a deep dive into the research and I feel like it's fun. I love reading books and articles and listening to podcasts and listening to experts, learning and applying all the time management, executive functioning strategies. A friend of mine recently told me about a book called The Organized Mind. I don't know who the author is, but it's on my list of books to buy because I know I'm going to love it. How can you not? So that's been a benefit. And what I will share here is that although I've always loved the sense of organization and order and structure, I have not always been great at actually implementing. And I've become a lot better at that over the course of my lifetime. I can remember being an undergrad student and procrastinating like nobody's business and writing my papers the night before. And what happened is, as a lawyer, I found I couldn't do that, especially as a litigator. I couldn't stay up all night writing submissions so I could show up in court the next day. It wouldn't work. I wouldn't be able to show up in court without having had any sleep. Having other people review your work also meant that, if you were not alone on a project and someone else needed to review it or rely on it, you couldn't just leave it to the last minute anymore. So I became a lot better at getting things done ahead of time schedule as opposed to last minute. And of course, once my kids came along, I had even more constraints on my work time. And so I learned to do things even when I don't want to. And now as an independent practitioner, I've had to really develop those skills of accountability and discipline. So as you know, I produce a podcast every Wednesday, and that is the result of me being self-directed and having systems in place to ensure that I do that. So you might think about yourself and how your efficiency has evolved over time and how at different stages you will be required to take on new skills, right? Adapt and be more efficient given what else is going on in your life. You've probably heard that expression. If you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. That might be you, right? You might also notice that when you're less busy, you're less efficient. That's totally normal. I see it all the time. It happens. Number 3, as a result of the planning and the research, I feel like I really do optimize my time and my days. I really feel like I make the most of every day. I get the benefit of my days. I typically will have a goal for each day, that goal being usually maybe 2 or 3 things that I really need to get done that are essential. I recap my days, so I take copious notes about what I've done in a day, which is a little bit obsessive perhaps. But what I like to do is just track my time. This is more so during the working stages. So summer's been a bit more relaxed, but during the work weeks, even though I don't record my time in 6-minute increments like I did as a lawyer, I will still make notes in my calendar to reflect what I'm doing over the course of the day because it keeps me accountable. I don't have a boss that's looking over my shoulder, so I kind of need to be my own boss. That helps me stay on track and stay focused. And at the end of the day, I do all that in a blue pen. At the end of the day, I take a pink pen and I might write 2 or 3 bullet points of things that really satisfied me that day. That could be coaching calls. It could be a talk that I delivered. It could be a walk that I went on. It could be a meal with my kids. So I like to highlight what was really great about that day. So I feel like I'm optimizing my time. So that is one of the benefits. Another benefit is there's very little waste. If I am disciplined about planning and following through, I find I tend not to waste as much time. So I think I have mentioned on the podcast before that I can fall into this pre-bedtime habit or pre-sleep time habit of hopping onto Facebook, which I don't normally hop onto, and getting lost in the reels. Lost in the reels. It's amazing how much time can go by in the reels. And what that does for me is, it's kind of fun in the moment, but usually it means I'm directly stealing from my sleep time. And I don't like that. It doesn't do anybody any good. So that's an area of waste. I find because I'm so conscientious about time, I tend not to waste as much time because I notice when I'm wasting it. The same is true of calendaring. So I'm pretty disciplined about my calendar during the workday. So I know some lawyers get really distracted by their phones, by social media, by the news, by shopping on their phone while they are at work. So because I've structured my time in such a way and because I have limits, right? I know I have X number of hours and then I'm on duty. My kids come home and I'm doing meal prep, I'm spending time with them, we're eating dinner together, etc. I tend not to get too far down the distraction rabbit hole. There are exceptions, of course, but again, it can be helpful if you've got this sense of how you want your days to go. It builds up a little bit of insulation against distractions that can pull you away from your tasks. So that would be the 4th benefit. So far the benefits are having plans, structure, organization in your routines. It can be that deep dive into the research and learning all the tools, those external tools, and also how your brain functions so that you can optimize your time and your resources. The 3rd benefit was that you do optimize your time and your days. You, 4th benefit, tend to waste less. And then the 5th benefit, which is probably the most relevant for you, for this podcast, for the lawyers that I work with, which is that I get to help other people. If you think about what it means to be an organized person, to be reasonably on top of things, to deliver your work on time, it means that as a professional, I can deliver and produce results for people when they expect them so they can trust me that I'm going to get things done. I occasionally miss appointments. I occasionally miss deadlines. I missed one recently this summer because my systems were all off. It's okay. The person who I was accountable to sent me a lovely email and just said, hey, can you get this to me next week? And I had completely just lost track of that deadline. Everything's good. It's all submitted, but it rarely happens. It does happen, but typically people can rely on me to get things done on time. If there's a scheduling conflict and I see it, I'll address it right away. So people can work with me and know that I will deliver the thing that I say I'm going to do, right? There's a trust there. It also means that I have more peace in my business because I plan things in advance. I see where things are coming up and I try to put as much structure in there as possible. I know my working style. I create efficiencies. I know sometimes I'm going to work weekends and evenings, and that's fine with me. I'm strategic about all of that. It also means that I can support my family, right? I am the primary person at home. My husband travels for work. And so it means I am accountable for clean laundry. I'm accountable for food on the table. So I make sure that I deliver to my kids that they have the support and the structure that they need to feel well taken care of. And it also means that I can help you. If you are a lawyer struggling with your time, if you're trying to figure out, like, how do I structure my weeks better? Like, how do I stop feeling so out of control? How do I stop feeling like there's no point in scheduling because everything gets sidetracked? How do I deal with all these emails coming in? How do I deal with the fact that, I go to do one thing and something else comes up? Or maybe you're the opposite. Everything is working super smoothly in your professional world in the sense that things are getting done. You're efficient. You feel like all your systems are in place, but you really struggle to take time away for yourself. And I've been in both of those situations that's a whole other can of worms, and one that is equally valid, right? I think with the clients that I work with who have a similar enthusiasm for efficiency, often the challenge there isn't so much how do I get things done in the day? How do I execute my work? It's how do I pull myself away from work and actually reintegrate into my life the things that I love, whether it's exercise, self-care, time with their partner, time with their kids, time on holiday. So that can be the counter challenge that you might have that you need help with, overcoming the mindset blocks of wanting to be efficient all of the time. How do you then rest? How do you rest without guilt? And I've got a podcast episode about that as well, if that's something that resonates with you. That's the last benefit, really, is that I can help people, right? I can help my clients directly through my work. I can help my family by supporting them, by having structures in place. And I can help my clients directly in the sense of, you need help with your calendar. I can help you with that. You need help taking more time for yourself. I can help you with that. So the cons. If you're listening to me and you are not an enthusiast, and so far everything that I've said just is crazy important to you, then you can probably guess the first con, which would be that having structures like this in place means that there's a trade-off. If you are a planner like I am, it means that you're probably also less spontaneous. So I have found that, especially since having kids, I am a lot less spontaneous than I used to be. Now, a large measure of this is the result of having children. And from the very early stages of my children's lives, they have been the kinds of kids that need routine and structure. So I was speaking with a lawyer the other day who's going back to work after a mat leave, and she was sharing about her child's nap schedule and how that's going to shift, and the impact that that will have on her child in the afternoon. Now, it's been many years since my children had naps, but when I was in it, I was in it. And we would plan everything around the nap schedules. Are they having 2 naps a day, 3 naps a day? Are they down to 1 nap a day? And for my family and my children, if I had routines and schedules and structures in place, our lives were very smooth. Well, relatively speaking. I mean, I still had kids that were young, and you know what that's like if you've been there. It's a lot, right? It's every day is an adventure. It can be really hard. Kids teethe, they go through stages. As a parent, you're kind of tired, you're sleep deprived. If you're working at the same time, it's like totally crazy. So the routines were essential, because if the nap schedules were off, then the sleep schedules were off. And if they were grumpy, then it meant everything was just that much harder. So I became a slave, really, the minute my son was born, to the daily flow of structure and routines. And kind of, when the kids are babies, it's like they sleep, they eat, you change them, and it all repeats. It's like a 3-hour cycle. So you get used to that. And so I don't think that has left me. And I've been a parent now for almost 13 years. So there's a cadence to my day that I didn't really have in me before children were born. But since having children, I'm really a slave to the structure and flow of days and routines. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for spontaneity. It's not that I don't like to be spontaneous. It's that I prefer the joy that I get from having structures in place. Now, I recorded a podcast episode last week about my trip to Paris, and I mentioned in that trip, I planned enough activities that we had some structure, but not so much that we couldn't just wander around and be spontaneous. So you can structure and allow for spontaneity in your day. It's 100% doable, but it means that there's a lot less spontaneity. So that's one thing. In that category, I would say sometimes I prioritize process over people, which can feel kind of crappy if you have a plan in place and you're implementing the plan. It can sometimes seem a little bit rigid to other people, or you're not able to spend as much time socializing as you would like because you've got this plan and you need to adhere to it. I find sometimes the plan can take over, right? If I'm so fixated on getting the job done, sometimes I'll miss the big picture. I'm so caught up in the moment of getting the details right, I can miss the big picture. I can sometimes come across as cold. Again, I think that comes down to that process over people. I can do that sometimes. I try not to, especially with my kids. I really do try to prioritize them over the process. I learned that during the pandemic. I was reminded of that at my son's high school orientation. This is going to be a big year, first year of high school. You want to prioritize the relationship over routines. So I get that, but it's not always easy for me to do. And then finally, I find that because there's usually an underlying plan for the day, I can have a sense of urgency that is kind of present until the thing is done. So you might be able to relate to that, where it's like until you've completed your day, there's that, I mean, it's not full-blown anxiety and it's not necessarily urgency. It depends on the task, but it's like until it's done, I can't really fully relax. So maybe that's a good thing because it keeps me motivated, but it's also a con in the sense that, sometimes I wish I was more easygoing. I could go with the flow more, but I am not wired that way. I am wired to get things done, and then I feel like I can sit down, unwind, and enjoy the rest of my day. So that is one of the cons. Another con is that I can get frustrated. I mentioned at the beginning, I don't like to waste time. I don't like to waste resources. I don't like to waste food. I don't like to waste. And so if I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm wasting my time, where I don't really need to be there, I can start to feel quite agitated because I start to think of all the other things that I could be doing with my time. So that's probably a downside. And I will share that I felt very validated the other day because I was listening to a podcast. I don't know, she's a French influencer. I can't remember her name offhand. I sort of found her on my, rabbit hole journey of French speaking podcasts that I talked about last week. I've kind of developed this new thing where I'm trying to expose myself more to the French language. And so she was talking about how she really valued her time. Like it's really, really important to her. And she gets really mad if people kind of take that time from her. And she gave the example of going to lunch or to dinner with friends, and then they invite another friend, and she feels like it's diluting the conversation. She went as far as to say that they invite people who are mediocre. And I had to laugh because I thought, wow, that's kind of harsh. But what she was fundamentally saying was not that the people were mediocre, but that she did not relate to them. She didn't know them. They weren't kind of in her close circle of friends. She wouldn't otherwise choose to spend time with them. And I get what she was saying. There's that feeling of prioritizing and valuing your time so much that you don't necessarily want to be put in a situation where you are forced to do something that you wouldn't have planned for, right? And maybe you can relate to that. I found it validating. There are times where I just want to see one of my friends and I don't want to see my friend and 100 other people. I just want to see that one person. Or I just want to go to the grocery store and pick up a can of milk. I don't necessarily want to stop and, smell the flowers and talk to everybody along the way. I don't have that in my time budget. So getting frustrated, I know I'm not alone. At least there's this French podcaster who gets frustrated over whatever it is that frustrates her. There are things that frustrate me. I'm sure there are things that frustrate you. So that can be a con. When you're planned, you might get frustrated about things and then feel badly about it. Sometimes I might say things or I might act a certain way. I might feel like I kind of recede into myself, or I pull away, or I kind of get impatient. I want to go. I don't love that. I don't love that about myself. I feel like maybe I'm being off-putting, but it's also sort of driven by this sense of like, I need to go. I've got something else I need to do. So I can feel that sense of frustration. It used to happen if I'd line up at a coffee shop. I don't really go to coffee shops these days, but that feeling of like, you're trying to get to work and you've placed your coffee order and there's 1,000 people ahead of you and it's taking forever and the barista gets your order wrong and then they have to remake it and etc. Right? There's that feeling of like, ugh, I could have just done without. So that is a con. Maybe you can relate. A third con is I can set unrealistic expectations for myself. So usually that shows up in the form of my plan. What am I going to do today? Oh, here's this list of 5,000 things. Of course, I'm not going to finish them. And what I've come to terms with is that I'm fine with that. What I do now is I do write out my list for the day and I look at it. And if there's so much on that list that I know I'm not going to get through all of it, I will put little numbers next to my list. And I do this with emails in particular because I find it hard sometimes to respond to emails. You probably have that same thing where you get email after email, and I like to batch in terms of when I deal and respond to emails. And it's not that I don't want to connect with people. I really, really do. But email is hard, right? It takes time. And so what I'll do is I'll write out all the emails I need to send, and then I will put little numbers next to them. So this is really when I've built up maybe 10 or so emails that I am going to respond to. I rank them in order of what needs to happen when, and that gives me that sense of like, okay, I'll get through all of them. And sometimes I don't get to the end, but at least I know I've done them in a sequence that makes the most sense. So for you, you might think about when you're planning and it's overly ambitious. How do you deal with that? Well, you look at that list ahead of time. You think about what absolutely you want to do, what sequence you want to do it in, and then you can number it and move forward from there. So I know I will have great expectations and realistic results. So I now plan for that. I don't beat myself up over it. I just move things to the next day or whenever makes the most sense. What can be challenging, and this is the next con, is that sometimes it's exhausting for other people. So I know I can do this when I'm speaking, right? I have a pretty large appetite for information, especially when I'm listening to a podcast or when I'm attending a talk. I don't mind a lot of information, but I do find that this is something that I'm working on as a speaker, is trying to break things up, chunk things up a little bit so that there's a little bit less of a fire hose approach and more of a, I don't know, here's a bit of information, let's reflect on it, let's process it. That's hard for me to do. It's a skill that I need to develop. I've started to develop it, but it's one that I need to kind of get better at because I see it as maybe an efficiency, right? I want to maximize the value by giving as much information as I possibly can. But I think sometimes that can lead to too much, right? Too much information. This can happen in the execution of a day. So I mentioned in last week's podcast episode about my trip to Paris with my daughter and how there was one day where I planned this like Odyssey trek from our hotel room to faraway museum land. I was going to return us home. There was a lot of walking involved. If I actually measured it, it was probably way beyond what would be humanly possible for a 10, almost 11-year-old girl in the hot sun, 30 plus degrees in Paris. But that's what I had in my mind's eye as the agenda. So sometimes I might set something up, and for me, it's doable and I'm motivated by the efficiency of it. There's something in there that I am in love with. In that case, it was like, oh, how amazing it will be to see all of Paris by foot, to walk out there, to explore these neighborhoods. We'll get food along the way. It'll be great, etc. So for me, it seemed like a great idea, but I realized not everybody has that same appetite for efficiency. And so we shifted the plan around. No problem. But I need to be careful about dragging people along if they aren't motivated by the same things that I am, if they're not as interested in being as efficient. Now, I see this in our house as well. I think, again, I was mentioning I have a certain appetite for organization and having things be in their place, but that's not necessarily shared by the people that I live with. And again, like my daughter, I'm talking about her a lot today, but she actually likes it when the house is a little bit messy. She'll be like, I like it better. It feels more comfortable. It feels like people actually live here. And I get that, right? I don't want my home to feel like a museum where it's uncomfortable and everything has to be perfect. And, if there's a streak on the glass, you have to wash it right away. I don't want that. And so I think just appreciating that other people have a different sense of efficiency. Other people may not care so much about the schedule. They don't really care so much about arriving on time. They don't feel as strongly about meeting deadlines. They don't feel like every day needs to be optimized or whatever. And so just appreciating that my approach might not be everybody's approach, and that's okay. Again, I'm thinking about you listening and how you might be connecting with me on the level of like, oh yeah, I'm so like you and I see myself in you. Or you might be like, yeah, I've got people in my life that are just like you. And maybe now it's like, okay, I can understand why you're like that. You still are not like that, but you can see how I'm wired that way, how it's almost like I can't help it. It's just how it is. So unrealistic expectations for myself. I can exhaust other people. And then finally, the last con that I have here is that it can be hard to take breaks. It can be hard to rest without feeling a sense of guilt, like I should be doing something else, without having that mental list run through my head about all the things that I need to do. So what I do for myself is I'll often transition in my day, right? Especially on a work day, I will do all the things I need to do, which is usually professional work. There's usually a meal at home. I typically will have a meal for my family if they're here. I mean, the summer's been a bit different because they've been at their grandparents for a bit. We've been on the road for a little bit. We've done some meals out. My husband's been home more. Maybe he's taken over the meal prep. So it's been a little bit different. But typically my productivity ends in a day when the kitchen is clean and the counters are wiped and I'm done for the day. And I love to go for a little walk at that point to basically transition out of my workday. My productivity is done. And when I get back, I just relax. That time that I spend outside decompresses me. I feel good. And then I'm ready to sit down with my kids, watch TV, do whatever, and just chill for the rest of the day. Confessions. I promised you some confessions. So I've got 3. None of them are really crazy confessions, but I thought they're kind of fun. So in order of like least embarrassing to most embarrassing, perhaps. Number one is I write down everything. I have lists for my lists. I'm a total list junkie. If you look at my desk, I've got sticky notes and lists and reminders. Each day, practically, I'm writing down a list. So even this morning, I've got a list of all the things that I'm doing in the day, right? It was go for a walk, have a shower, drink some coffee, write my journal, record podcast. I've got a newsletter to send. Like I will itemize out all of my steps. And I do that because it helps me see what's on my schedule. It helps me stay on track. It helps me stay focused, and it helps me kind of relieve my working memory, right? I'm not thinking about what's coming next. I've just got it on a list. And then I have the satisfaction of crossing things off. Yes. And sometimes, here's a confession, I will write something on my list that I've already done because I just want to cross it off. Funnily enough, now I'm thinking about this house project list that I have. I've neglected it for the past few months. It's been busy around here, but instead of removing items from that list, I've actually just changed the font. So it's a typed out list because there's so much on it. And as I went through some of the tasks, instead of removing items, I just changed it to that strike through font so that I can see, oh, I've done that. I've done that. I've done that. So that's one confession, is that, I'm really a slave to lists. I love crossing things off lists. I will cross things off on purpose. That visual cue, that satisfaction that I get is visceral. And so I am all over the list. That's one confession. The second confession, again, these are not all that juicy. I'm probably thinking, Paula, that's not really a confession. So I'm sorry if these aren't juicy enough, but here they are. The second confession is that I'm very much a creature of routine. I kind of think back to the Mark Zuckerbergs and, oh gosh, his name is escaping me, Steve Jobs, the people you hear about who kind of wear the same thing every day because it means fewer decisions, less decision fatigue. And I do that in my life with my clothing. So for example, I'm wearing a tank top right now that I have in about 7 different colors. I love the feel of it. I love the cut of it. And so when I saw it at the store, I just bought tons of them. I have the same cowl neck sweater. If you work with me and it's wintertime, chances are you'll see me in a turtleneck sweater. And I bought it in multiple colors. It turns out I really only wear the black one and the cream colored one, or it's more of a gray-y beige. So I bought that in multiples, particularly the black one. I am now on, I think, the 5th version of the same sweater. I went to the store a few months ago and they told me they were discontinuing my sweater. And so it was an outlet store. And I was like, oh, well, I better stock up because I'll need that black sweater. So I think I have 2 more fresh black sweaters in my closet, knowing that that's what I want. Same thing. I have a moisturizer cream that I learned was being discontinued. So I stocked up on that. So I am a creature of habit. Food is the same thing. I find the foods that I like and I basically eat them on repeat until I get tired of them. And then I switch. Usually it's my lunch. I don't really eat breakfast these days, but my lunch will be the same. And then dinner, I'll have some variety, but it's usually a variety of the same types of foods. So I like to keep things consistent. Same with my calendaring. I have pretty routine ways of calendaring, of scheduling my days. My weeks, I have now tried to have themes for each day. So Wednesday is podcast recording and newsletter day. Tuesdays are typically, I do webinars on Tuesdays. I have coaching days that are allocated. So I like to have predictability and routines. Maybe they're rituals, my same workout every day. Like I do the same thing. I have outfits that are very easy to wear. So all of that creates an ease where I'm no longer spending time making decisions about things that I know that I like. I just do them. They're predictable. I like them. And that frees me up to be more creative in other areas of my life. So that's confession number 2. I'm weirdly routine oriented. And then the third is, and this is probably the biggest confession, and it ties back to that first con, which is process over people sometimes, is that I will sometimes avoid people because I am fixated on getting the thing done that I want to get done. So that can mean that if I'm at home and somebody rings the doorbell, I might pretend not to be home. I do that quite often. And when my kids are home, they will just answer the door and I'm like, oh, I guess I have to deal with this person now. And I don't want to do that. I don't. Sometimes the phone will ring and I'm in the middle of a task. I will let it go to voicemail. Now, I recommend doing this, especially if you're in a thinking task and you're at work and it's not an urgent phone call. Let it go to voicemail. You can always call that person back. But I know for some people, it does not sit well with them. They cannot see somebody's name on their phone and not respond to it. I can. I don't feel badly about it. Okay, maybe I'll feel a little bit badly, but not badly enough to actually answer the phone. And I guess where it gets to be a true confession is that I will be out on the street sometimes. Maybe I'm running to the store to buy a carton of milk, but I've got a call that is coming up. And so I'm on a tight time budget because I don't want to be late. I might see somebody that I know and deliberately kind of like avoid them because I don't want to be in that awkward situation where I'm kind of having a conversation, kind of not, but I've got to go and it feels awkward. I don't love having to it's almost like picking up the phone and saying, I can't talk to you right now, goodbye. Sometimes it works, but only with people that you're really close with. I find sometimes it doesn't work with people that you're not as close with. So that is my confession, is that I will sometimes be that person. And I say this knowing that I'm not alone in this. So if you can relate, hopefully that feels a little bit validating and you feel like, okay, yeah, no, that happens sometimes. Not all the time, right? I love people. I love talking to people. I love hearing about what they're up to. I love that connection. It's, one of the things that makes life feel so rich and full. And at the same time, I know myself. And if I'm thinking about how I need to get back home and, I've got that Zoom call coming up and I'm stressed because I'm trying to kind of be brief with somebody, I'd choose not having that interaction over having that kind of rushed interaction. So those are the confessions. So that brings us finally to takeaways for today. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you've kind of resonated with some of this, that you are kind of at least nodding your head or feeling like, yeah, I can relate to this, or, oh, no, I can't relate to that. But isn't that interesting that somebody would think that way? What are the takeaways? So first of all, I think we are at a transition point in the year where we're going from the summer to school structure. And so for yourself, you might be thinking about, okay, in terms of efficiency, first of all, where are you on the spectrum, right? Do you consider yourself an efficiency enthusiast where you love routine, you love structure, you love planning, you hate waste? Or do you find yourself on the opposite end where you just don't like structure, it doesn't come naturally, you don't want it in your life? Maybe you're at the opposite end and you do want a bit more structure, or maybe you have a lot of structure and you want more flexibility. So think about where you're at, and that'll shift over time. It'll shift on your depending on your life circumstances. So where are you and how do you feel about structure, efficiency, and why does that matter? What are some areas of your life where maybe you want to be more efficient? Maybe it's planning, maybe it's the way you spend your days, maybe it's the way you spend your money, maybe it's, are you focusing your energy on the right things? So think about where you want to be efficient and what that means to you, right? As we go from summer to fall, what's going to be required of you in terms of increasing efficiency potentially. Usually it's an uptake in September as opposed to that more slower period. I also think as a takeaway, it's having compassion for yourself and for others. So if you hear some of the pros and cons of what I experience as an enthusiast, then you might have more compassion for yourself as well. You might think, you know what, I'm kind of similar. Like, people have told me I'm a little bit too strict on my schedule and now I feel a bit validated, or, I don't always want to stop and chit chat on the street. And now I feel like, okay, that's okay. Like it's not the end of the world. Other people are the same. Or maybe you hear this and think, you know what, like, I really could make more time for myself and maybe I should do that. Or maybe you think, you know what, like I really like the way that I am. I don't really need that much more structure in my life. I understand why my partner is like that, why they always want to plan the trip so far ahead, why they're always asking me to decide what restaurant I want to go to. I'm not like that, but I can see how they would be like that. So hopefully it's helped to raise a little bit of, awareness of how people are structured and wired differently and how we can appreciate how we are and how others are. And then finally, I think just thinking about how, if this is something that you would like support with, there's tons of really great resources out there. There's my podcast episode. There's a whole series on time management. So there's lots of tools here if you want to learn some of the tips and tricks about planning, about organization, about executive function. There's tons of resources here. You can download my podcast roadmap where the time management for lawyers episodes are basically organized in themes, right? They're organized, they're there. You don't have to listen to all of them, but you can, I think there's like 25 or so on that list. So you don't have to listen to all of them, but you can kind of see what the topics are and decide, do you want to dive into that? Do you want my support as your coach to help you create systems? Because I obviously would love to do that. As you can tell, it's something that lights me up. Hopefully it would light you up as well. So I can help you with that. You can help yourself with that, of course, through, as I mentioned, the podcast, but there's also so many great books and resources out there to support you. So there's that. And I guess that's kind of it, right? In terms of takeaways, right? So notice where you're on, where you fall on the spectrum. What are some areas where maybe you want to be more efficient or less efficient? And then what are the tools, right? What support can you give yourself to follow your desires, whatever those happen to be? So with that, I am going to thank you again for joining me here this week. I am now getting closer to leaving our house today. I'm excited to embark on this very short road trip with my family. That will be loads of fun. As you can imagine, I've planned the essentials, right? We've got our pool in there, trip to Walmart, trip to the adventure park, and I've even picked out a fabulous looking Mexican restaurant for dinner tonight. So hopefully that is a hit. Hopefully we go through with that. And for all of you, I hope your first week back, if it is your first week back, or at least this season of your life, this return to September, is a smooth transition for you, that you have a very fruitful year. Oh, and the last thing that I wanted to mention, sorry, this is one of the takeaways, is that the reason that this is important as we transition in particular from summer to fall is that in the summer, I think we typically prioritize rest. And what I'd love to invite you to consider as a takeaway here is, if that's you, where you have less trouble resting in the summer and more trouble doing that in the fall, is to think about consciously how you can incorporate time. Again, this may come through planning for rest throughout the course of the year, so that you're not feeling like you rest during the summer and the rest of the time you don't rest. How can you incorporate pockets of rest into your weeks and days so that you feel like your life is a little bit more balanced, a bit more sustainable? Because I know for some people, you ramp up this time of year and then it feels unsustainable, right? You hit December and you're exhausted. So let's focus on having a bit more ease and a bit more rest, even if you feel guilty about it, between now and the end of the year. So that was a bit of a segue or tangent. I don't know, but I want to wish you a fabulous September, early September, and I will look forward to reconnecting with you again next week. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.